What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you guys how to sound deaden your car. Spoiler alert, it is a boatload of work. So I'm going to start this video off by saying this: the amount of change that you're going to see by adding these sound deadeners is going to be very dependent on the type of vehicle you're dealing with. So for example, this little Honda Fit, the only place that it had factory sound deadener was on the floor. There was absolutely nothing in the doors, nothing in the roof, nothing in the hatch. Well, if you go out and buy, let's say, an Acura, which is, a luxury vehicle, it's going to have more sound deadening in it from the factory. So therefore, the amount of change that you're going to see is going to be different than what I'm going to see working on this Honda. So take that for what it is, guys. So the vehicle you're dealing with is obviously going to change the results that you're going to get. So what I'm going to do for you guys in this video is I'm going to show you, first of all, how loud is this vehicle to start with the interior installed. I'm then going to remove the interior, take another sound reading. I'm then going to install the first layer of sound deadening, take another reading, install another layer of sound deadening, take another reading. I'm then going to install the final layer of sound deadening. So I'm going to do 3 separate layers in certain parts of this car and then take another reading. So what that's going to do for me is it's going to keep me from having to install the interior in this car 3 times. To give you guys an idea how much time it took me to just remove the interior, I have about 4 to 5 hours just removing the interior from this car. So this is by far the most time-consuming video that I've ever made. So let me take you guys over to the bench. I will show you the products that we're going to be using, as well as the tools and some of the stuff you're going to need to get this stuff installed. So to sound deaden this little Honda, I'm going to do a 3-layer approach. So the first 2 layers come from Noico. The first layer that we're going to do is going to be an 80 mil butyl rubber mat, and this stuff is adhesive back. So you remove the interior, stick this stuff to the metal. Once you have the butyl rubber covering the interior, the next thing that we're going to install is going to be this Noico 150 mil closed cell foam. Now what this is going to do is a couple things. So yes, it's going to act as a sound deadener, but not nearly as much as the butyl rubber. What this is going to do is this is going to help insulate the interior, and it's also going to act as a decoupling layer for the 3rd layer that we're going to put on. So the 3rd layer that we're going to put on is going to be mass-loaded vinyl. Now, I'm only going to put this stuff on the floor. This stuff's pretty hard to work with, but I'll give you guys more details about this when we go to install it. These are kind of all the tools and supplies that I used on my particular install to get all this sound deadener installed. So over here on the right, I got some trim tools to get the interior apart, clip release tool, utility knife, scissors to, obviously cut the material. Once you have it cut to size, you're going to need a roller to, roll everything down, especially with the butyl rubber, to make sure you have good adhesion. Before you put anything down, you want some sort of cleaner, whether it's rubbing alcohol or some sort of parts cleaner. You want something that is going to dry and not leave any residue on the surface. These 2 final things over here this is foil backed tape or like aluminum tape, and this is going to be vinyl cement. The vinyl cement, you may want to use it, you may not. Personally, I'm not a big fan. After I use the tape, I stopped using the vinyl cement. Final thing, going to be some cardboard to possibly make some templates if you guys are going to do the mass loaded vinyl. And probably the most important thing is going to be some sort of kneeling pad. You're going to spend a lot of time crouching and on your knees, so it's in your best interest to either get some knee pads or a pad like this, because otherwise your knees are going to be aching. Okay, so in this early stage of the video, I'm sure you guys have 3 nagging questions. First of all, how much is all this stuff going to weigh? Well, what I have here is 1 square foot of each material. Now, this 80 mil butyl rubber weighs 7/10 of a pound per square foot. This 150 mil closed cell foam, 1 square foot, weighs about 25 grams, and that is with the backing material still installed. This stuff weighs virtually nothing. To put that into pounds, I believe it's 0.005 pounds. It's negligible, the amount of weight that the foam is going to add. Next thing over here is going to be the mass loaded vinyl. The mass loaded vinyl is 1 pound per square foot. So next question I'm sure you guys have is going to be, How much do I need to buy? So if you go on Noico's Amazon page and take a look at their products, they also have a chart on their product page that will list the quantities required for different vehicle types. And they also break it down, like if you're just going to do the trunk, if you're just going to do the doors, if you're just going to do the roof, you're just going to do the floor. And then they also give you the grand total of all those down at the bottom. So for this little Honda Fit, they quoted me about 89 square feet and I used 90. Now, if you guys are, trying to figure out and do the math, so if you take the weight of this, which I used 90 square feet of this at 7/10 of a pound, I added 63 pounds of butyl rubber to this Honda Fit. I used 26 square feet of the mass loaded vinyl. So if you add those two together, it gives you about 90 pounds. That is how much weight that I added to this little Honda Fit. I understand there's some of you at this point going, there's no way I want to add 90 pounds to my car. And you're right. If you have a track car or basically a race car, you're not going to do something like this. But for a daily driver, guys, you're not going to notice another 90 pounds. I don't care what kind of car you're driving. You're just not going to notice it. Especially when you couple that with the fact that that 90 pounds is evenly distributed throughout the entire car. It's not like I took 4 cinder blocks and put 4 cinder blocks in the trunk and the car sits, squatting all the time. With it evenly distributed between the front and rear wheels, you can't hardly tell at all. The only way that you could tell is if I told you. So probably the third and final question I'm sure I'm going to get from you guys is, can I just use 1 or 2 of these products and I don't want to do all 3 layers? And yes, you can. So you can 100% put down your butyl rubber, put the foam over top of it, reinstall the interior, and go without the mass loaded vinyl. Now, where people sort of run into issues is you have to understand the butyl rubber is designed to be in contact with the metal. That is how it works. So what this stuff is really designed to do is reduce panel resonance and thereby reduce interior noise. So it has to be in contact with the metal for that to work. So let's say, for example, you put down foam, put down mass loaded vinyl over the top of it and say, oh, you know what, I want to put down butyl rubber. That's not going to work. That's not how that product is designed to work. It's not going to do anything for you. So by that same sort of thought process, if you wanted to use, let's say, butyl rubber and mass loaded vinyl, that isn't going to work either, because the way that this mass loaded vinyl is designed to work, it needs to be held off the surface of the metal, because if it's in contact with the surface of the metal, the panel is going to resonate and it's going to transfer that sound through. So the foam really has 3 different functions. So yes, it's going to reduce the noise because it's going to reduce the echo in the vehicle. It's also going to insulate because there is a little bit of R value to that foam. So, and the final thing is it's going to help hold that mass loaded vinyl up off the surface of the metal so the sound cannot transfer through the mass loaded vinyl. Of the 3 products, the mass loaded vinyl is the only one that is a sound blocker. These other 2 are sound deadeners. Yes, you can just use the foam and the mass loaded vinyl if you don't want to put down the butyl rubber, but you're not going to come back after the fact and put the butyl rubber over the top, because that's not how it's designed to work. So with that, let's go over to the car. We're going to get a baseline sound reading with the interior installed and without the interior. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add each layer of sound deadening and then continue taking sound readings after I add each layer. And that's going to tell us how well each layer works and hopefully give you guys a good idea of what you should spend your time on and what you shouldn't. So now that we have a dB baseline with the interior installed and no sound deadener as it came in from the factory, I'm going to go ahead and remove the entire interior. Take your time if you guys are going to do this. Spend some extra time, try not to break anything because it's going to make it that much easier to put things back together. So for example, I'm taking all of like my seat hardware, seat belt hardware, things like that. I'm putting them back in the holes that they came out of just so I can keep track of the hardware and where it went and where everything came from. Once I have the interior removed, then I'm going to get another baseline. So we're going to be able to compare interior installed versus interior removed. What's the change in the noise level? And then once the interior is removed, we're going to start adding our sound deadeners. We will make our comparisons with the interior removed, adding each layer of sound deadener. So guys, this is the first layer that we're going to be installing. This is the Butyl Rubber mat. This has to be the first layer if you're going to use this stuff. So this stuff has to be in contact with the metal of the vehicle. And what this stuff does is it reduces the vibration of the panels. It also reduces the road noise because it's not going to transfer the vibration again through the paneling. And what I mean by that is it's not going to keep the paneling from acting like a giant drum. So as you guys can see, the bottom of this roof, there's absolutely no sound deadening on it. There's a little bit on the floor from the factory, but we're going to go over top of all of this with this Butyl Rubber first. Before we install any of these Butyl Rubber products, you got to clean the surface. So I'm just using some parts cleaner and I'm going to hose everything down. And the nice thing is about using parts cleaner is it's going to evaporate and not leave any residue. So you're going to clean this whole area out. And now you're ready to put down your sound deadener. So anywhere you're going to put the sound deadener, you need to use like rubbing alcohol or something like that. I'm just using parts cleaner, like I said, because it evaporates, doesn't leave any residue. You want to use a cleaner that is going to evaporate and not leave any residue on the surface, because if the surface is still wet and you try to attach the sound deadener to it, it's not going to stick. As far as putting the Butyl Rubber down, guys, some people will sit here and make patterns out of cardboard and you know, make everything perfectly exact how it's supposed to fit. Like if you guys look here, I still have the bolts for the seats in the floor, and what I'll do is I'll put the rubber down right over top of it and just come around with a utility knife and just cut the hole out where the bolt is. To me, it just seems a lot easier than, you know, making cardboard templates and spending all your time cutting out cardboard when you could just spend your time cutting the rubber and, you know, do it in one step instead of two. So it's up to you. I think if, you know, I was doing this on a consistent basis where I was doing this for a living, yeah, I would go through and probably make a cardboard template for like all the common cars out on the road. But for a DIY guy at home, to me, it's not really all that necessary. Because like I said, you can just cut out the areas that you need to cut. It's not really that big of a deal. So once you got the area prepped, you're going to peel the backing maybe off the rubber. Set that off to the side so it's going to be out of the way. Don't let the rubber stick to itself because you'll never get it back apart again. Just start pushing it down. Now you're going to feel the bolts, so like right there's a bolt, right here's a bolt. I'll cut that spot out. But you want to get this thing put down so there's no air bubbles in it. When you're putting the Butyl Rubber down, guys, be sure and wear some gloves. Do as I say and not as I do, because the edges of this Butyl Rubber, the foil is extremely sharp and it'll paper cut you very easily. Once you got it sort of stuck down, then you're going to take your roller. If you'll notice, the roller changes the texture of the product. And what that's going to do is that's going to tell you where you've got it stuck properly and where you don't. So the worst part of this car to try and sound deaden is going to be the doors. The access to the inner door skin on this little Honda is not very good. The holes in the doors are pretty small. And this is one of the reasons that I didn't bother creating cardboard templates, because I couldn't fit the cardboard templates through the holes in the doors. So the way I ended up soundproofing this outer door skin is I did it in strips. So I cut strips big enough that I could fit it through the holes in the door, and I just did it in small pieces. So I don't have one giant sheet inside the door simply because I couldn't fit it physically into the door in one piece. Noico recommends 100% coverage using this butyl rubber product. There are some people online that'll tell you you can get by with 25% or 45% coverage, but I knew if I only put down 25 or 45% and I didn't get the results that were expected, that was going to be the first thing everybody blamed, was I didn't put enough down. So I'm putting this butyl rubber down in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. If you guys want to change how you're putting it down on your install, feel free, but if you don't get the results you expect, blame your install. Don't blame the product. So this is what it looks like, guys. I got the butyl rubber installed. I got it everywhere. It's inside the doors. I didn't do the outer portion of the doors because I have to get back to the inside of the doors to put the foam in. I also did the ceiling. So we're gonna go on a test drive real quick and do the same test that we did earlier and see if this makes any difference. So at this point, I'm sure some of you are like, man, that really doesn't seem like that big of a change for the amount of work you put into that. And I'm with you. So if you guys strictly just look at the dB meter, the numbers are virtually the same. They may be slightly less, but they're very similar. Now, one thing I did notice when I started editing the footage a little bit was when I took the footage and put it back to back, there's a distinct change in the noise level, in the pitch of the noise level. Now, I'm not screwing with my audio through my editing software. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to screw with you guys like that. That's just blatantly misleading your audience when you're shooting a video on soundproofing and you start screwing with sound levels. So I'm going to give you guys the raw footage and the raw sound back to back, and you can hear there is a difference between the two before and after. The next layer we're going to install is going to be the 150 mil closed cell foam. Before you install the foam, you got to do the same thing that you did with the butyl rubber, so you got to clean it first. So same deal, use parts cleaner, whatever you have at your disposal, whatever it's going to dry, not leave a residue. Get the surface nice and clean. So these are the sheets. They're peel and stick just like the butyl rubber was. So figure out where it's gonna go, peel it and stick it. That's pretty much all there is to it. So I've already done the doors on the inside that you can't see. I've done the roof. I've done the trunk already. So the only thing I can say about this stuff is it's nice because the sheets are so small, so they're real easy to work with. But the downside to that is kind of obvious, and that is there's going to be a lot of seams. And with this closed cell foam, it is imperative that you have no gaps between the panels. Well, when the sheet is this small, you have to use a lot of sheets. So you have to be very precise with how you're placing them. And I've gotten better as I've went, but I'm going to show you guys, my install is not going to win any beauty contests. it's going to work, but it's not going to look pretty. At the end of the day, to me, it really doesn't matter because you're going to put the interior over top of it anyway. So if you guys take a look here, the next sheet that I'm going to install, there is a seat bolt right here. Now, like I told you guys earlier, I put all the seat bolts back in, all the major fasteners back in, first of all, so I know where they go, and second of all, it makes it a lot easier, in my opinion, to cut. So what I do is I'll lay this over top and get just a ballpark idea of where this fastener is going to end up, and I'll cut an X in the top of the foam. So that what that'll do is that'll create a hole, and I do this before I peel the backing off. If you peel the backing off and try to cut it after the backing's off of it, it leaves residue. It doesn't look nearly as clean. So make all your cuts that you're gonna make before you peel the backing off of it. Once you stick this stuff down, it is pretty much down. Like, there is no peeling this stuff up. It starts to tear when you go to peel it up, because the foam isn't, you know, very strong naturally. So once you get this thing stuck, that's pretty much where it's going, unless you have another sheet that you're willing to sacrifice, because you're not going to reuse it after you've stuck it down. So I'm going to keep going with this, guys. That's pretty much how I'm doing this. It's just very time consuming, very tedious, and it seems like it goes quick when you're doing big flat sections like this, but trust me, when you get inside a door or you're trying to do a trunk someplace that, you know, first of all, you don't have a lot of access, there's a lot of curves to the paneling, you have to make a lot of cuts, and it just takes more and more time. So like I said, this is kind of the ideal scenario, what I'm showing you guys here, because your access is good. You can use full sheets. You don't have to make any cuts. All right, so this is what the interior looks like with the 150 mil closed cell foam installed. As you guys can see, my install is not going to win any beauty contests, but it's going to definitely get the job done. So I did the floor, did the roof, also did inside the doors. And since I'm done inside the doors, I installed the Butyl Rubber on the inside of the doors closest to the passenger compartment, so I'm able to actually seal off the inside of the doors now that I'm done inside the doors. But yeah, let's go take this thing for a drive and see what kind of difference this thing made. So guys, the results I got from that 150 mil foam were actually really good. I was not anticipating it to work as well as it did, especially when Noico themselves say that it really isn't a sound deadener, and you have to think of it more as a insulation from the heat and the cold. Now, the reason I believe that I had such good results with it is prior to me installing this foam, you have to understand the interior was completely removed and there's a bunch of hard surfaces inside the interior. So meaning any sound that gets into the interior, it's then just going to bounce around inside the interior because there's nothing inside to absorb the sound. If you guys hear it, it has a pretty good echo to it. What I believe to be happening is the foam is absorbing the echo. So once the sound does make it into the interior, it just bounces into the foam and then is dissipated. It doesn't just continue bouncing around. So the final layer that I'm going to install on the floor only is going to be mass-loaded vinyl. Now, this stuff is much harder to work with than the Noico products because this comes on a giant roll, and basically you have to make it fit the vehicle. So to me, the only way to make this stuff work is you're going to have to use cardboard and cardboard templates. The stuff really doesn't conform to the floor all that well. It's pretty hard to work with, like I said, and you just have to take your time putting this stuff down. Now, the way this stuff is designed, it needs a decoupling layer between the sheet metal and the mass-loaded vinyl. So that is going to be the function of the foam. The foam is going to hold the mass-loaded vinyl off of the metal and keep that noise from being transferred into the cabin. The mass-loaded vinyl is actually a noise blocker, so it is the only thing out of the three that actually blocks sound. But like I said, it's so hard to work with. It's very hard to put it on, you know, the inside of your doors and anywhere other than the floor, because hanging it is next to impossible. As far as working with the mass-loaded vinyl, the easiest way to cut it that I found is going to be a utility knife. Scissors were just kind of a pain. You could probably use tin snips. Those would probably work pretty well. But like I said, I used a utility knife. So once you have it all marked out with the pattern, you know, I just marked it out with a Sharpie, cut it with a utility knife, and, you know, installed it, just basically laid it into the floor. As far as cutting out the holes for the bolts, I used leather hole punches. I'll link them in the description. They worked really well for this, and all my holes in the floor for my seat belts and my seats came out great. As far as the vinyl itself, you cannot have any gaps in the vinyl. Just like, for example, if your neighbor was mowing his grass and you had the windows open in your house, if you left your windows cracked, that noise is still going to transfer really well into your house. But if you close the windows completely, most of the sound is going to be blocked. This is kind of the same deal with this mass-loaded vinyl and the foam. You need to cover as much of the surface as possible without leaving any gaps. So this is what the install looks like, guys, after I got it all done. As you guys can see, the seams I ended up putting tape on, and I used like aluminum tape that you would use for ductwork. It actually stuck really well. I tried regular masking tape and it would not stick to vinyl whatsoever. Like I said earlier in the video, you can also use glue, but the glue takes time to dry, and, you know, tape is pretty much instant. So that's totally up to you whether or not you want to use glue. The other thing is with the glue smells. There's going to be a lingering odor for a couple days after you get all this stuff installed. So my recommendation is to go with the tape, but you guys can do whatever you want. So as you guys saw, I didn't see a massive change from, you know, the interior with the foam in it to the interior with the foam and the mass-loaded vinyl. I didn't see much of a change at all in the dB meter, and here's why. That dB meter is only recording the highest noise level. It does not care where that noise is coming from, and there's no way that I can convey this through a video to you guys, but the only places that the noise is coming through this interior is the wheel wells and basically through the doors. The bottom of the floor where I coated with that mass-loaded vinyl, it is much quieter. But unfortunately, like I said, I have sound coming in other places. So I'm at the point now where unless I put mass-loaded vinyl on the doors and the wheel wells, I'm not going to see any further changes. So the next thing I have to do now that I have all the sound deadening installed is I have to reinstall the interior. So the next comparison we're going to make is going to be how this car came stock without any sound deadener and full interior versus how this car is now with 3 layers of sound deadener and a full interior. What's the difference? This video was a ton of work for me to produce, as you guys can tell. I'd appreciate if you go down and just hit the like button if you got something out of this video, because the audience's interaction with the video, as far as the amount of time watched, number of likes, number of subscriptions, number of shares, ultimately the audience's interaction with YouTube videos is ultimately what drives YouTube videos to gain more views. So I would appreciate it. That's why YouTubers won't shut up about it. With that, back to the video. So those are the results I got. As you guys heard, I didn't have a drastic change at 40 miles an hour, but at 70, it was definitely noticeable. Now, I don't think you're gonna pull somebody off the street, stick them in my Honda Fit that I've sound deadened, and they're gonna sit there and go, wow, this is the quietest car I've ever ridden in. It's not. But if you ride in one that's sound deadened compared to one that's not, you know, back to back, you would definitely notice a difference. And the biggest difference that I personally noticed was talking. So after I got this done, my fiance and I just kind of went for a ride, and it was just much easier for us to talk back and forth. It didn't feel like we were talking over the road noise like we were prior when we got on the interstate. In that regard, it is much nicer, but is it a drastic difference where you're gonna fall asleep driving the car because it's so quiet? No. So is there anything else that I could have done to sound deaden this little Honda? Not really, and here's why. It's getting to the point that reinstalling the interior was kind of a chore, and the worst part was actually gonna be the floor. I added close to a ½ inch of material to the floor of this car, so when I went to put the carpet back in, the carpet really didn't fit that well. I had to make some relief cuts on the carpet to make everything fit correctly, and it just took extra work to make it fit because I had added so much material. There was a couple places where I know if I had added more foam or more butyl rubber that I was not gonna get the interior panels installed. Noico also sells a 315 mil foam, so it's like double the thickness of what I installed in this Honda. And if I tried to install that in this interior, there was no way that certain parts of the interior were gonna go back together. The 150 mil is, if you're doing like a standard car, that's what you want to use. The 315 mil foam is actually for a van because the back of, you know, utility vans and things like that don't have any sort of interior paneling, and that's what that stuff is really designed for. As far as other things I could do, I could change the tires. Tires are, you know, obviously one of the big contributors to road noise, so much so that Continental actually developed a tire for Bentley, and I'll link it for you guys if you guys want to check it out. It's actually pretty neat. But Continental developed a tire for Bentley that they actually put foam inside the tire on the back side of the tread to help mitigate road noise for high-end cars. Continental actually sells this tire to the public. You can get it in certain sizes, but you know, it's not available for a 14-inch wheel for a Honda Fit, so it's not something that I'm really looking into. The other thing that plays a major role in the sound of a vehicle is the engineering. What I mean by that is how the vehicle is engineered from a noise, vibration, harshness standpoint. Noise, vibration, harshness is a huge goal for engineers, and they do as much as they can as possible to mitigate noise at the source rather than just block it out like I did in this video. At the end of the day, yes, the sound deadener is going to help. Don't expect to go from, you know, an 80 decibel interior on the highway to a 50 decibel interior on the highway. It's just not going to happen. As you guys saw in the video, I think 3 to 5 decibels on the highway at 70 miles an hour, it's a realistic expectation. If you expect that you're going to drop 20, 30 decibels with this, there's no way it's going to happen. As always, I'll put links down in the description to the Noico products, the mass loaded vinyl, as well as the tools that I use to get all this sound deadener installed. As always, guys, if you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, go down and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.